Escaping from one of the richest and most powerful men on the planet is not a plan. It is a sentence. Haya knew it and fled anyway. This is the story Dubai never wanted you to know. In May 2019, a 45-year-old woman left a palace in the United Arab Emirates with her 2 children and an amount of money that various sources put at between 31 and 40 million pounds sterling. She was not a tourist. She was the 6th wife of the most powerful man in the Persian Gulf, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, ruler of Dubai, Prime Minister and Vice President of the United Arab Emirates, owner of an estimated $18 billion fortune, the man who built the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, and who turned a desert settlement into the most visited city on the planet. And the woman who walked out of his palace and did not return was also something more. She was the daughter of the late King Hussein, the first of Jordan, and the sister of the current King Abdullah II. She was a princess fleeing a sheikh. She was the scandal no public relations operation could bury. The story of Princess Haya bint al-Hussein is one of the most extraordinary, produced by 21st century royalty. Not because it is a story of thwarted love, though it is that too, but because it is the story of a woman who had everything the conventional world considers impossible to overcome, and who decided to use it to confront directly the power that held her captive. She had the lineage. She was a king's daughter. She had the resources. Enough money to fund a flight and years of legal battle. She had the protective surname. Her brother was the King of Jordan, who assigned her a diplomatic post to give her immunity in London. And she had the lawyer, Fiona Shackleton, Baroness Shackleton of Belgravia, known in London's legal circles as the Steel Magnolia, the same attorney who had represented Prince Charles in his divorce from Lady Di. With all those cards in her hand, Haya sat down, across from the system, and won. What she paid for that victory is the heart of this story. To understand who Haya is, you have to start with the father she had, and the father she lost. King Hussein I of Jordan was one of the longest-serving, most stable, and most internationally respected Arab leaders of the 20th century. He governed Jordan from 1952 until his death in 1999, 47 years, during which he navigated wars, occupations, assassination attempts against his own life, and the complete transformation of the map of the Middle East with a political skill that his contemporaries described as supernatural. He was the king who signed peace with Israel in 1994. He was the king who received Yasser Arafat and Ariel Sharon with equal ease. He was the man everyone wanted as an ally. King Hussein married 4 times. To Dina bint Abdul Hamid, to Antoinette Avril Gardner, to Alia Toucan, and to Lisa Halaby, who became Queen Noor. He had 11 children with these 4 women. Haya is the 6th. Her mother was Aliyah Toucan, the king's 3rd wife, known as Queen Aliyah. She was an extraordinary woman, co-founder of Jordan's first airline, a pioneer in using public image for humanitarian causes, an activist who achieved during her brief reign genuine advances in the political rights of Jordanian women. Queen Aliyah died on February 9, 1977, in a helicopter accident. She was 28 years old. Haya was 2 years and 8 months old. It is the echo of other stories this channel has told. The mother who disappears too soon and leaves a mark that defines everything that comes after. For Haya, the mark was the passion for horses her father passed on to her as a way of consoling her. King Hussein gave his little daughter a foal that had also lost its mother. It was called Bint al-Ri. It was the Arabic way of telling a 3-year-old girl that the pain of loss has a place where it can be transformed, and Haya never left the horses behind. She studied at the finest private boarding schools in Britain, Badminton School in Bristol and Bryanston School in Dorset. She then earned a degree in politics, philosophy and economics from the University of Oxford in 1995, the same course David Cameron and Boris Johnson took, the one the British elite chooses when it wants to form leaders. She was intelligent, cosmopolitan, multilingual, with a humanitarian agenda that included the presidency of the Dubai International Humanitarian City and the Zero Hunger Award that the UN World Food Programme granted her in 2015. She represented Jordan at the Sydney Olympics in 2000 as a show-jumping equestrian, becoming the first Jordanian woman to compete in the Olympic Games. She was, in short, exactly the kind of figure the United Arab Emirates wanted, associated with their international image. Glamour, Western education, royal connections, and a veneer of progressivism that allowed Dubai to present itself as something more than the authoritarian state that its human rights activists described. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum was born in Al-Shindaga, Dubai, in 1949. He is the man who turned Dubai into what it is. The artificial Palm Islands in the Persian Gulf, the Burj Al Arab with its rooftop helipad, the Burj Khalifa that broke all height records, Dubai Internet City, Dubai Media City, the Dubai International Finance Center. He oversees all of this, while also serving as Prime Minister and Vice President of the UAE. His estimated fortune of $18 billion places him among the world's wealthiest monarchs. He is also one of the most important racehorse owners on the planet, with the Godolphin stud competing on the greatest circuit in the world. And he is a poet. He publishes his verses on Instagram, in Arabic and English, with the regularity of someone who considers poetry a natural extension of his authority. Because in the classical Arabic tradition, a leader's ability to compose verse is part of his prestige. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is not simply the ruler of Dubai. He is the architect of one of the fastest and most spectacular urban transformations in modern history. When his father, Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, died in 1990, and Mohammed began to carry more weight in the Emirates' decisions, Dubai was still a mid-sized Gulf city, living primarily off oil revenues and traditional trade. 30 years later, Dubai is the most visited city in the world, with 70 million tourists annually before the pandemic, an airport that is the busiest on the planet for international traffic, a financial district competing with Singapore and the City of London, and the icon of the modern city that can be built from nothing if you have enough money and enough will. The human cost of that transformation is something that Dubai's tourism reports do not include. The construction of the Burj Khalifa and the Palm Islands and all the infrastructure that made Dubai what it is was done with migrant labor, primarily from South Asia, under conditions that human rights organizations have repeatedly documented as labor exploitation. The kafala system, which ties a migrant worker's legal status to their employer in a way that makes it practically impossible to leave an abusive work relationship without legal consequences, has been criticized by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, and by UN special rapporteurs in multiple reports. The United Arab Emirates is an authoritarian state that bans trade unions, restricts press freedom, criminalizes political dissent, and, as high as legal proceedings made plain, holds members of its own ruling family against their will. The paradox of Dubai in the 21st century is exactly that. It is the vacation destination of choice for millions of people who value the sun, the luxury hotels, the shopping malls, and the superficial safety of a state where street crime is practically non-existent. And it is simultaneously a state where a princess needed to flee in secret with her children because someone had left a loaded weapon in her room as a warning of what awaited her if she did not comply. Both things are true at the same time, and most of the tourists who photograph themselves in front of the Burj Khalifa consciously choose not to think too hard about the second. Haya and Mohammed met in 2002 at an equestrian competition in Jerez de la Frontera, Spain, during one of the equestrian events that were the shared passion connecting them. They married on April 10, 2004, at the Al Baraka Palace in Amman, in a private ceremony, attended by Abdullah and Rania of Jordan. Haya was 30, Mohammed was 55. The age gap was 25 years. By 2004, he was already one of the most powerful men in the world. She was the first woman of royal lineage to become the wife of an Emirati ruler. She was his sixth wife, not his only one. Mohammed's first wife, Sheikha Hind bint Maktoum, is the official First Lady of Dubai, and the mother of 12 of his children, including the designated heir, Hamdan bin Mohammed. Mohammed has, according to available records, at least 6 wives and 30 children. Polygamy is legal in the United Arab Emirates, and in the context of the ruling family, it is also a political practice. Marriage alliances with different branches of Gulf. Elite families are part of the power fabric that sustains the system. Haya was the international jewel of that system. The the Jordanian princess with Oxford, and the Olympics, and the humanitarian agenda, who presented Dubai at the World Economic Forum in Davos and at European royal galas. The early years of the marriage produced the expected public image: appearances at Royal Ascot, at Europe's great equestrian prize events, at the international summits Mohammed attended in his capacity as Prime Minister. They had 2 children, Al-Jalila, born December 2nd, 2007, and Sheikh Zayed, born December 7th, 2011. Mohammed announced Zayed's birth on Twitter with the pride of a father who at that moment was 62 years old and who considered his son with Haya a special bond. Haya declared publicly her admiration for her husband with the fluency of someone who knows exactly what is expected of them. "Every day, I am fascinated by everything he does. I thank God every day for how fortunate I am to be with him." That was before. What came after began in December 2018, when something Haya saw or discovered shifted the axis of her life in a way that had no return. Princess Latifa bint Mohammed Al Maktoum is one of the Emir's daughters, born of a different marriage than Haya's. In February 2018, Latifa attempted to escape Dubai for the second time. The first had been at 16, in 2002, when she was captured and, according to her own video-recorded testimony, imprisoned and tortured for 3 years as punishment. In 2018, at 32, Latifa planned a second escape with a Finnish friend named Tiina Jauhiainen, her martial arts instructor, and a former French spy named Hervé Jaubert. On February 24, 2018, Latifa and Jauhiainen took an inflatable dinghy from the coast of Oman into international waters, where a yacht with an American flag was waiting for them. They had been at sea for 8 days when the yacht was boarded off the coast of India by commandos, who launched smoke grenades and held the women at gunpoint. Latifa was sedated and placed on a private aircraft back to Dubai. Jauhiainen was detained in Dubai for 2 weeks. Before the escape, Latifa had recorded a 40-minute video that her friends published after her capture as a life insurance policy. In that video, recorded with a calm that is more chilling than any dramatism, Latifa said, "If you're watching this, it doesn't mean something good. It means I'm dead or in a very, very, very bad situation." She described the restrictions under which she lived: unable to drive, unable to travel, unable to leave Dubai since 2002. She criticized a father who only thinks about his own image and who has destroyed the lives of so many people. And she said that the failed 2002 escape attempt had cost her 3 years of imprisonment and torture. Haya knew Latifa. She was her stepmother, in the sense that the marriage had placed her in that position within the family. And in December 2018, when the international scandal over Latifa's capture threatened to become a serious diplomatic problem, Haya made a decision that would alter the course of her own life. She called her friend Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and asked her to travel to Dubai to help with what she described as a family dilemma. Robinson went. She met with Latifa in the presence of the family, and on leaving, she made a statement that human rights activists around the world criticized with a harshness that Robinson herself later acknowledged. She said that Latifa was in the loving care of her family and that everything was fine. But what Robinson saw on that visit told her something different from what she said in public. According to the BBC, Robinson discovered during the visit concerning facts about Latifa's situation that left her feeling not secure about the situation she had publicly validated. And it was that information that began to transform Haya's perception of the man she was married to. According to the account that would emerge in court, it was what Haya discovered about the treatment of Latifa that led her to begin feeling in danger herself. And it was during that period, in late 2018, that the British court that would later examine the case determined Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum had begun to act in a manner intended to intimidate and frighten Haya. What happened exactly in the palace between December 2018 and May 2019 is known only to those who were inside it. What came to light during the trial is enough to understand the scale of the fear. Haya had during that period a relationship with one of her bodyguards, Russell Flowers, a former British military man. The court determined the relationship lasted approximately 2 years. When Mohammed found out, or when the members of his court who watched everything informed him, the situation became dangerous in a way Haya articulated in court with the frankness of someone who no longer has anything to lose. They left a loaded weapon in her room. They told her a helicopter would land at the palace and take her to prison. It was the most explicit message possible. This is what awaits you if you stay. In May 2019, Haya left Dubai. Initial reports placed her in Germany, escorted by a German diplomat, requesting asylum. Her brother, King Abdullah II, acted immediately. In October 2019, he appointed her first secretary of the Jordanian embassy in London, providing her with diplomatic immunity in the United Kingdom and closing off any possibility of forced extradition. It was the protection that her position as a king's sister could buy, not perfect, but sufficient for the legal process to unfold. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum responded to his wife's flight in the only way a man of his position and culture could respond, with a poem. He published it on Instagram in Arabic and English. The title was, "You Lived, You Died." The content was what one would expect from a man accustomed to never being contradicted. Accusations of betrayal, of deceit, of having abused the trust he had placed in her. Some phrases circulated in the international press as explicit threats, messages reaching Haya after her flight telling her they could reach her anywhere. The Instagram poem was the public version of that threat, the declaration of a man who wanted the world to know he had been betrayed and that he would not accept it in silence. What Mohammed did not calculate, or calculated wrongly, was that the trial would be held in London and not in Dubai. That Judge Philip Moore of the United Kingdom's High Court of Justice was not a position the Emir could call on the telephone with the same effectiveness as he could call Gulf heads of state. That the British legal system had its own rules, and that those rules made no exception for being the ruler of Dubai and Prime Minister of the Emirates. The Steel Magnolia deserves specific mention because Haya's choice of lawyer was itself a declaration of intent. Fiona Shackleton, Baroness Shackleton of Belgravia and Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, is Britain's most powerful divorce attorney for the highest elites. She represented Prince Charles in his divorce from Lady Diana. She represented Paul McCartney in his divorce from Heather Mills, one of the most high-profile cases of the past 20 years. She's known in the family courts for her combination of outward elegance and absolute toughness in negotiation, which is precisely what produces the nickname Magnolia on the outside, steel on the inside. When Haya appeared in the London courts with Fiona Shackleton at her side, the message was unambiguous. I am not here to negotiate. I am here to win. Mohammed's legal team, represented by barrister Nigel Dyer, attempted in the financial hearings to argue that Haya's claims were unprecedented in their magnitude and unjustified by the circumstances. The judge disagreed. In his ruling, he noted that money had never been an issue during the marriage, and that the standard of living the children had enjoyed during their years in Dubai established the reference benchmark for any calculation of future maintenance. It was the argument that high elite divorce lawyers know perfectly well. If you accustomed your 9-year-old child to receiving 3 cars as a gift, the court will take note of that when calculating the lifestyle they need to maintain. In December 2019, the court determined that Mohammed had orchestrated the abductions of his daughters, Latifa and Shamsa, and that he continued to hold them deprived of their liberty. In March 2020, Judge Andrew McFarlane published his verdict in 34 pages. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum had ordered and orchestrated the abduction and forcible return of Shamsa from Cambridge in 2000, and of Latifa in 2002, and again in 2018. He had carried out a campaign of intimidation against Haya that had forced her to flee, and he had acted in a manner that, on the balance of probabilities, amounted to breaching both British and international law. Princess Shamsa, born in 1981, had attempted to escape at 19 during a holiday in England in the summer of 2000. According to her sister Latifa's account, she was located 2 months after her flight, drugged, returned to Dubai on a private jet, and locked away. A Scotland Yard detective who tried to investigate the case was blocked by Dubai authorities. Since then, practically nothing has been heard of Shamsa. In October 2021, the the court determined that Mohammed had authorized the hacking of Haya's phone using the Pegasus spyware produced by the Israeli company NSO Group and sold exclusively to governments. It was the most solid technological evidence of the surveillance campaign. The Emir of Dubai had ordered installed on the devices of his ex-wife and her legal team the same software used to spy on dissidents and journalists. The court held that this evidence reinforced the conclusion that Mohammed represented the primary threat to the security of Haya and her children. On December 21, 2021, Judge Philip Moore published his final ruling on the financial matters. In 73 pages, he reached a conclusion that no divorce case in British legal history had produced before. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum was to pay Princess Haya and her children a total sum of approximately £550 million, equivalent to around $728 million at the exchange rate of the time. It was the largest settlement ever awarded by a British court in a divorce case in the history of the country. The breakdown was as follows: £251.5 million to cover Haya's security costs for the rest of her life, because the judge had determined that Mohammed represented a clear and permanent risk to her that would persist indefinitely. Approximately £290 million for the maintenance and security of her two children, Al-Jalila and Zayed, until they reached independence, and additional sums to cover the administration costs of their two UK properties, a mansion adjacent to Kensington Palace in London and their main residence in Egham, Surrey. The court also ordered armoured vehicles for the family, an independent security budget, and the upkeep of the children's ponies and pets, to which they had been accustomed since their life in Dubai. The judge was explicit about something that divorce rulings rarely articulate with such clarity. The primary threat facing Princess Haya does not come from external sources. It comes from Sheikh Mohammed himself. It was the court of a sovereign state declaring that the prime minister of another sovereign state was a security danger to his ex-wife. It was an unprecedented declaration, one that no Arab government could make about Mohammed, and that the British legal system had made through its own mechanisms. Mohammed did not appeal the ruling. His spokesman issued a brief statement. He has always ensured his children are well cared for. The court has now decided on the financial matter, and he does not wish to comment. He has asked the media to respect the privacy of his children. It was the response of someone who had lost the legal battle and needed to save face with the only dignity remaining to him: silence. Haya was awarded sole custody of Al-Jalila and Zayed. Mohammed may maintain telephone contact with his children, but cannot see them in person in the United Kingdom under the terms of the agreement. It is the most personal dimension of the defeat. The man who built the tallest building in the world, who governs an emirate with 40 million annual visitors, who has 30 children with 6 wives, cannot hold the 2 children he had with the woman who challenged him, because a London judge determined that he himself was the greatest danger to their safety. The broader context of Haya's story also includes what happened to Queen Noor of Jordan, King Hussein's 4th wife, after the king's death in 1999. Queen Noor, who was American by birth and was called Lysa Halaby before converting to Islam and marrying Hussein, was widowed at 47 and found that her position within the Jordanian royal family had become complicated with the succession. Abdullah II, Hussein's son by his 2nd wife, is the heir who governed Jordan, and Noor's position as a widowed queen without children on the throne is symbolically respectable but institutionally peripheral. It is the structure that the succession system of Arab monarchies inevitably creates. When the king dies, the wives who are not mothers of the heir lose the protection that the husband's position gave them. Haya, by contrast, had her own lineage independent of her husband's. She was a king's daughter, a king's sister, and that gave her access to institutional protection that most sheikhs' wives do not have. When King Abdullah II appointed her first secretary of the Jordanian embassy in London, he was exercising exactly that protection. The power of the Jordanian state placed as a shield between his sister and the power of the Emirati state. It was family diplomacy applied to a personal battle, and it worked. The role of Russell Flowers in all of this is the element that Haya's critics used to try to undermine her moral credibility during the proceedings. Flowers, the British bodyguard with whom Haya had a relationship while still married, was photographed with her on several occasions before the flight, including at the Al Maktoum family's annual visit to Royal Ascot. It was that photograph, according to available accounts, that alerted members of Mohammed's court to the relationship, who transmitted the information to the emir. The emir's reaction was what it was. The 4 bodyguards who subsequently blackmailed Haya over that relationship received in total more than £6 million in silence payments. Flowers signed his own confidentiality agreement. The court acknowledged the facts without using them to invalidate the central narrative of the danger Haya faced. The element that makes this story something beyond high society drama is what it revealed about the system, about how power operates in Gulf states, where women of the ruling family can be held in palaces that are prisons without any internal mechanism having the power or the interest to intervene. Shamsa has been absent from the public world for more than 2 decades. Latifa was seized in the Indian Ocean by commandos and returned to Dubai sedated. Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, was used as an image laundering tool to make the world believe Latifa was well. And the only mechanism that worked, the only one that produced a real result, was the specific combination of privilege, money, and connections that Haya had, and that most women in similar situations in Gulf countries do not have. Latifa reappeared publicly in the years following the trial. In Spain in 2021, in Paris in February 2022, alongside Michelle Bachelet, the then UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The appearances were interpreted differently depending on who evaluated them. For the Emirati government, they were proof that Latifa was well and free. For activists, they were controlled appearances designed to silence international critics. The truth of what occurs inside the palace remains, as always, invisible. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is also a poet, and that deserves more analysis than it typically receives in the chronicles of the legal proceedings. In the classical Arabic tradition, from the pre-Islamic era of the great Mu'allaqat poems to the poetry of Andalusia, a leader's ability to compose verse was inseparable from his authority. The Arab poet was not merely an artist. He was the spokesman of his tribe, the custodian of its honor, the one who translated into words what the community felt and what the enemy needed to know it faced. Mohammed publishes his verses on Instagram regularly, and he has followers who read them as political declarations, because in a sense they are. The poem he published after Haya's flight, titled You Lived, You Died, was the continuation of that tradition by other means. He was not speaking into a void or to a generic audience. He was speaking to Haya, to those around her, to those who might be tempted to help her, to all those in his court and his circle who needed to know that the Sheikh knew what had happened and had a name for it: betrayal. It was the modern equivalent of the Arabs, warrior poet reciting warning verses before battle, except that the battle was a legal one and the verses would end up as evidence in a London courtroom. The Pegasus software deserves more detailed explanation than it typically receives in press summaries. Pegasus is a product of the Israeli company NSO Group, which sells it exclusively to governments with the declared justification that it serves to combat crime and terrorism. What researchers at the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab and Amnesty International have documented is that Pegasus has been used by multiple governments to spy on journalists, activists, lawyers, opposition politicians, and in this case, on the ex-wife of a ruler, her legal team, and her bodyguards. The fact that the Emirates used Pegasus to spy on Haya is not only a violation of her privacy, it is evidence that the Emirati state uses advanced surveillance technology against people on the territory of another sovereign state, with implications that go well beyond a divorce. The court that determined Mohammed had authorized that hacking was doing something states rarely do with such clarity, declaring that the government of an allied state had operated illegally on its territory. Britain and the United Arab Emirates have close diplomatic and commercial relations, including defense agreements and arms sales that are politically sensitive. The British government took no formal diplomatic action as a result of the court's findings on the hacking. But the court's findings are in the permanent judicial record and are cited in the reports of human rights organizations on patterns of surveillance by the Emirati government. The legal legacy of the Haya case is significant beyond the record-breaking settlement figure. The case established that English courts have jurisdiction to adjudicate family matters involving heads of state or members of foreign ruling families when the children in question are present on English territory. It established that spyware installed by a foreign government on devices of individuals in British territory can be analysed as evidence in English legal proceedings. And it established that the wealth and power of a defendant, however extreme, are not factors that the English family court weighs in the defendant's favour when the evidence points in the other direction. For organisations working on women's rights in Gulf states, the Hire case is a resource cited frequently, but also with the warning of its limitations. What allowed Hire to win was an unrepeatable combination of factors for the vast majority of women in similar situations. The royal lineage that gave her access to the diplomatic protection of a foreign state, the financial resources to fund years of litigation in some of the world's most expensive courts, the international reputation that made it politically costly for the Emirati government to treat her the same way it treated Shamsa and Latifa. Without those factors, the outcome would have been different, and without those factors, Hire's situation would have been Latifa's, returned sedated and without access to the outside world. Princess Hire is 50 years old today. Her children Al-Jalila and Zayed live with her in London and Surrey, surrounded by the security the court ordered financed. The severe risk assessment the court recognised remains part of her daily reality. Al-Jalila is now 17. Zayed is 13. These are the years when children begin to ask questions about their history and about why their life is the way it is and not otherwise. And what their parents and their circle will have decided to tell them about what happened is something that appears in no judicial document and probably never will, because it belongs to that private space the legal process can never fully reach. There is also in Hire's story an element that legal and journalistic analysis rarely develops in sufficient detail: the specific dynamic of being the youngest wife of a powerful polygamist in a system where the first wife is the first lady and the others occupy positions that depend entirely on the husband's will. Sheikha Hind bint Maktoum, Mohammed's first wife, mother of 12 of his children including the heir, is Dubai's official first lady. She is the one who appears in the photographs of state events when protocol requires it. She has the institutional status that a first wife in that system possesses. Hire was the sixth wife, the most educated in Western terms, the most internationally visible, the one who brought the Hashemite royal lineage that none of the other wives could bring. But her position within the palace depended entirely on whatever attention Mohammed chose to pay her. That dependence is the core of the problem the Hire legal proceedings laid bare with a clarity that analyses of polygamy in Gulf states rarely achieve with this level of documented detail. It was not that Mohammed was necessarily more violent or more controlling than other men in similar positions in his culture. It was that the system in which he operated gave him tools of control that no democratic system places at any husband's disposal: the power to withdraw passports, to ban travel, to mobilize security forces to retrieve members of his family who had escaped, to use spyware to monitor his ex-wife's communications on the territory of another state. It was the power of a ruler applied to a matrimonial conflict, and that power has no equivalent in any system Hire might have encountered in the Western world where she had been educated. The irony that Hire's legal proceedings underline is that Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum built Dubai with the express intention of making it a global hub, the meeting point between East and West, the place where international business, luxury tourism, and multilateral diplomacy converge on terms of neutrality and prosperity. It is the project of his entire professional life, and the divorce trial demonstrated that the openness Dubai sells as its brand is a selective openness for money, for tourists, for international executives, not necessarily for the women who live inside the system. Hire said in court, in one of the phrases that circulated most widely in the press, "I really want to be free, and I want them to be free." It was a phrase that in its absolute simplicity said everything that needed to be said about what she had lived through. She did not want vengeance. She did not want public exposure for the pleasure of exposure. She wanted the freedom that any person in any part of the world would take for granted. And the fact that to obtain it, she needed 4 years of litigation, the best lawyers in Britain, the diplomatic protection of a king who was her brother, and $728 million says something about the world we live in that should not be forgotten as easily as it tends to be. The equestrian passion that connects Haya and Mohammed is also one of the keys to understanding how 15 years of marriage were built before everything broke. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is one of the most important racehorse owners on the planet. The Godolphin stud has stables in Britain, Ireland, France, Australia, and the Emirates. His horses have won at Ascot, at the Arc de Triomphe, at Epsom Derby. It is a passion that occupies a singular position in the hierarchy of his activities. Not merely a rich man's hobby, but an identity. The part of his life where Arab power and the English racing tradition blend in a synthesis he has cultivated for decades. Haya shared that passion genuinely. She had competed in show jumping at the Olympics, had horses of her own, knew the equestrian world from the inside. It was the common language that connected them when they met in Jerez in 2002, and that for years was the space where the relationship had its most authentic dimension. What the trial revealed is that sharing a passion is not sufficient when everything surrounding that passion is a power system that admits no equality. Haya was the only one of Mohammed's wives with an Oxford University education, an Olympic sporting career, and an independent international agenda. But she was still the sixth wife of a man who governed an authoritarian state, and when the relationship fractured, that system had mechanisms at its disposal that no Oxford education could neutralize from within. They could only be neutralized from outside, from a court in another country, with the diplomatic protection of a king who was her brother. It was the only way, and that the only way existed for Haya is the specific privilege that differentiated her from Latifa and from Shamsa and from all the women who have no king brothers, no Oxford, no diplomatic immunity. If this story has reached you, if at any moment you have thought about what it means to have all the money and power in the world and lose anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the system that protected Haya is accessible to all women or only to those who had the privilege she had? The debate is open, and if you want to know more about the women who stood up to the power of the Gulf and about those who did not have the same luck, this channel has more stories like this one, the ones that money could not silence. Subscribe.